The heightened nuclear risks arising from Russia's aggression against Ukraine.
Russia becoming more desperate.
Russia.
Even though Russia is invading its neighbors that were part of the former Soviet Russian Union, no one else is taking direct military action against the Eastern European nation. The main reason for this cowardly lack of action is the fear of cutting off supply chains by Russia and leading the whole world into a great economic crisis. In actuality, Russia is a nation composed of all kinds of natural resources thanks to its vast land area, and they have the capability to stand as a self-sufficient nation without depending on other countries. Russia is still standing fearlessly without much issue, even after the latest economic sanctions imposed by the Western powers in response to the Ukraine invasion. But everyone else fears that Russia is going to cut off their supplies to the global market. Why does Russia have such a strong position in global supply chains? Through this video, we're going to provide an answer to that question. Before we proceed, hit the subscribe button and smash the bell icon for more exciting updates. The self-sufficient nature of their economy was proven when other European nations imposed economic sanctions last year. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire publicly accepted that Russia is resisting the economic sanctions imposed by them, and the collapse is far from predicted, as Moscow's GDP was diminished only 2.1% in 2022. The worst part is that the IMF predicts that the Russian economy will expand by 0.3% this year despite the sanctions. This is the best numerical explanation for the global dependency of other nations on Russia. Russia is the 11th largest economy in the world and accounts for 1.8% of global market share as a producer and an exporter. However, it is yet to diversify its economy, and they make revenues mainly through the export of energy and grains. However, its contribution to global supply chains and other sectors is also not negligible. Russia has an enormous land area, containing different types of natural resources, and it holds a considerable proportion of the world's natural resources market. Thus, Russia doesn't need to depend on other nations, as everything can be supplied from its own production chain. This Eastern European nation can be simply described as an energy superpower with a large number of energy resources. Russia is the sole owner of the world's largest natural gas reserves, second largest coal reserves, and the 8th largest oil reserves. In addition, Russia possesses the largest oil shale reserves in Europe. I think that's enough to explain why they're an influential factor in the global energy market. Even though other European nations imposed sanctions on Russia, they're putting sanctions on themselves, as they have had to limit energy imports from Russia. Russia has the distinction of being the largest natural gas exporter in the world, and a large portion of it is exported directly to European nations, serving as the powerhouse of the entire continent. Even though Western powers hate Vladimir Putin and his Russia, it is not possible to commit a total boycott of gas imports from Russia, as 40% of the total natural gas requirement of the European continent is met by Russian supply. Natural gas is not transported by Bowsers or ships, as it's not feasible to transport so much in that way. So pipelines thousands of kilometers long are laid throughout the European continent to maintain a continuous supply from Russian gas wells. Despite their political conflicts, Germany is the largest consumer of natural gas, being responsible for consuming more than 56.2 billion cubic meters of it. Italy and the Netherlands are next on the list, consuming 29.2 billion and 13.2 billion cubic meters respectively. A considerable proportion of total demand of countries like France, Poland, Hungary, Spain, and Belgium is also fulfilled by these Russian gas supplies. So how can they really impose sanctions on Russia? It's a complete joke, just an act of criticism. Supplying uninterrupted energy to citizens is an essential factor in deciding the administrative power of a country. If any European government tries to move away from the Russian natural gas supply, they would surely jeopardize their own political power. In reality, it's not the Western powers, but Russia who has the power in deciding the nature of sanctions. If Russia decided to close any of the pipelines that supply gas to Europe, all of Europe would go into sudden collapse within a few days' time. So it's not a wise decision to challenge Russia by using unnecessary sanctions. Even though we focused heavily on natural gas, they can also make an impact on the crude oil market as they are the second largest oil exporter in the world. Even though European nations were unable to move away from natural gas supplies, they've enjoyed more freedom regarding crude oil. In 2021, more than half of the Russian oil exports went to Europe. With the economic sanctions, many nations moved away from Russia, resulting in the lowering of Russian oil prices. However, cutting off the Russian supplies created a heavy demand for other suppliers, causing a rise of oil prices in the global market. So, most former consumers of Russian oil had to move for the expensive consumers. But the largest consumers of Russian crude oil production, Russia and China, don't want to go for such extreme action as crude oil is an essential component to the heavily industrialized countries like India and China, and they don't want to bear unnecessary expenses from oil imports. Russia is also trying to promote oil in the Asian region at a cheaper price after loosening their European market, and this has become a greater threat to the economies of other oil exporting nations as they are going to lose their customer base in Asia. So that's only a simple explanation of how Russia can control the global energy market as they see fit, as they represent a significant proportion of global energy production. Russia has a large land area and the right climate conditions to carry out different types of crop cultivation. So they are a leading producer and exporter of a wide range of agricultural products. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter, accounting for more than 10% of global wheat production. However, a significant amount of that wheat is exported, contributing 20% of global wheat exports. Wheat is an essential food item, which is used as a main staple in many countries, and cutting off 20% of that supply can directly push the whole world towards starvation. So Russia's role in global supply chains is irreplaceable. In addition to wheat, Russia is an important producer of sunflower oil, barley, maize, oats, rye, beet sugar, potatoes, etc. Before sanctions were imposed, they exported $37.7 billion worth of foodstuffs in 2021. European countries were the main consumers of these agricultural products, and now they have to turn to other options, which are relatively expensive. This has resulted in a rapid rise of cost of living within Europe. In addition to these vegan agricultural products, Russia is a leading exporter of fish and other seafood items, and most European countries depend on these products. So, without Russian food supplies, it's not possible to fulfill the global food demand as nearly 160 countries depend on Russian agricultural products. Besides agricultural products, they are also a leading producer of fertilizer. As a nation, they generate billions through the export of fertilizers. In the production of fertilizers, they use natural gases as the raw material in the production chains. With the corona pandemic situation, fertilizer production was greatly affected by the closing of factories. So the prices had already skyrocketed, and the problem was further worsened with the Ukraine invasions. Western governments imposed sanctions on the Russian fertilizer exporting process, and this resulted in a further increase of fertilizer prices in the global market. Through imposing sanctions, countries have pushed themselves towards problems that did not exist. Thanks to the vast land area that they possess, Russians have access to a variety of mineral resources, and it's a global leader in the mining industry. It has a product range including commodities like aluminum, arsenic, cement, copper, magnesium compounds and metals, nitrogen, palladium, silicon, nickel, vanadium, etc. The mining sector is an important part of the Russian economy, and 19% of the value of whole industrial products is represented by the mining industry. Russia is the second largest producer of platinum, vanadium, and cobalt, as well as the third largest producer of gold, nickel, and sulfur. Besides that, there is a list of mineral commodities, and Russia is among the top 10 producers on that list. Russia is the second largest producer of rare earth elements, and the Ukraine-Russian war is happening in a period where there is already a rare earth element crisis. It's difficult to imagine a modern world without rare earth elements, and none of the Western nations dare to impose sanctions on Russian rare earth exports, as the consequences may end up in a global economic crisis. In that way, the whole world depends heavily on the Russian supply chains, and it's impossible to challenge that dominance in the global market. If Russia doesn't want to deal with other countries, it doesn't need to, as most of the resources are within its own territories, and they are more than enough to feed its entire population. But other countries cannot do this, as they are dependent directly or indirectly on those Russian products. So imposing sanctions on Russia is one of the biggest jokes I've ever heard, and the whole world is now suffering from those decisions as the consequences are now on the global economy directly or indirectly. What do you think about the influence of Russia on the global economy? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel to get more exciting economic and political analysis. See you guys in the next video. Goodbye.